"You didn't just save my ranch, you saved my life," the cowboy told the Apache girl. Now it felt tired, like an old man who had carried too much pain for too long. The cowboy lived there by himself. Every morning he woke before the sun, not because he wanted to, but because worry never let him sleep long. The land had not been kind to him in recent years. Rain came late or not at all. Crops failed. Cattle died one by one. Each loss felt personal. He had buried his parents on a small hill behind the ranch, and every time he looked at that hill, he felt the weight of being the last one left. This ranch was all he had. If it was gone, he would have nothing. He worked hard every day fixing broken fences, checking what few animals remained, and trying to keep the building standing. Some boards on the barn were old and weak, held together by hope more than nails. The house creaked at night when the wind blew, as if it was warning him that time was running out. Neighbors used to live nearby, but most had already left. Some sold their land. Others simply walked away. People said the area was cursed, that nothing good lasted there. The cowboy didn't believe in curses, but he believed in bad luck, and he felt it following him closely. One evening, the sky turned dark earlier than usual. Heavy clouds moved in fast, pushed by strong wind. The cowboy felt uneasy. Storms were dangerous, especially when the land was so dry. A single spark could turn everything into fire. He was inside the barn, trying to fix a broken beam when he smelled smoke. At first, he thought it was his imagination. Then he heard a strange sound like crackling. He stepped outside and froze. Fire was spreading near the dry grass, crawling fast toward the barn. Panic hit him hard. He grabbed a bucket and ran to the water barrel, but it was almost empty. He tried to beat the fire with a blanket, but the wind made it worse. Flames jumped higher, eating the land he loved. For the first time in years, the cowboy felt truly helpless. His legs felt weak. His hands shook. He thought of his parents, of all the years he had fought to keep this place alive. He whispered to himself that this was how it would end. Then, out of nowhere, he heard a sharp whistle cut through the wind. He turned and saw a figure running toward him from the hills. It was a young Apache girl. Her movements were fast and sure, like she belonged to the land itself. She didn't hesitate or look afraid. She grabbed a shovel leaning against the fence and started throwing dirt onto the fire, working against the wind instead of fighting it directly. She shouted at him to follow her lead. Her voice was calm but strong. Something in her tone made him listen without thinking. Together, they worked in silence, covering flames, breaking their path, and pushing the fire away from the barn. Minutes felt like hours, but slowly the fire weakened. The wind died down and the flames gave up. Smoke hung heavy in the air, but the danger had passed. The cowboy dropped to his knees, breathing hard. His arms burned with pain. When he looked up, the girl was standing a few steps away, watching the hills carefully, as if making sure nothing else was coming. He thanked her, his voice rough. She nodded but didn't smile. She told him the fire was not an accident. People had been moving through the land, careless and greedy. They didn't care who got hurt. Her words sent a chill through him. He had heard rumors of trouble nearby, but he never thought it would reach him. He asked her why she helped him. She looked at the ranch, then at the hills, and finally at him. She said the land had a memory. It remembered who respected it and who didn't. She had seen him work alone for many seasons, never taking more than he needed. That mattered to her. The cowboy didn't know what to say. No one had spoken to him like that before. He offered her water and a place to rest. She hesitated, scanning the area like a hunted animal, but eventually agreed. Inside the house, she sat near the door, ready to leave if needed. He noticed how alert she was, how her eyes never stopped moving. She wasn't weak despite her small frame. There was strength in her silence. As they talked, he learned she lived in the mountains, moving from place to place. Her people were gone, scattered by loss and broken promises. She trusted the land more than people now. Night fell quietly. The storm passed without rain. Outside, the ranch stood damaged but alive. The barn was saved. The house still stood. The cowboy realized something deep in his chest. This girl hadn't just stopped a fire. She had stopped the end of his story. And he had a feeling this was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them understood. The next morning, the cowboy woke before the sun, as usual. He moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake the girl sleeping on the floor by the door. She had stayed the night, though she barely said a word. He had offered a blanket and a warm spot near the fireplace, but she had simply nodded and curled herself up. He could tell she was used to living alone, used to relying on herself. Yet somehow she had trusted him enough to stay. That small trust weighed heavily on his heart. He stepped outside and looked over the land. The fire had left blackened patches in the grass, but the barn was intact. The house had survived too, though it looked older somehow, as if it had breathed through the night and endured the storm. He shook his head, thinking about the work ahead. He had always known the ranch demanded everything from him, but now it felt even heavier. The girl emerged from the doorway just as the sun peeked over the hills. Her dark hair fell around her shoulders, and her eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the land with careful attention. She spoke softly, telling him that the fire had been a warning. There were people nearby, moving through the valleys and ridges. They were careless with fire, but they were also dangerous. He listened closely, feeling a chill despite the warming sun. He had never met anyone like her. She moved with a quiet confidence, each step deliberate, as if she knew every stone and bush on the land. He watched her bend to inspect the soil, trace the tracks of animals, and point out weak spots in the fences. When she spoke, it was with purpose, not chatter. He realized she knew more about the land than he ever had, even after years of living here. Over the next few days, they worked together. She helped him repair the fences, showing him how to tie knots and place posts so that they would last against wind and weather. She pointed out areas where the soil was poor and suggested planting certain grasses to strengthen it. She knew how to find water where it seemed there was none, and could read the wind to know when storms were coming. The cowboy marveled at her knowledge. It was more than skill. It was wisdom passed down through generations, the kind that came from living close to the land. Despite the dangers outside, a quiet companionship grew between them. They spoke little of personal things, but their work side by side built trust. He taught her how to handle the horses when they needed to move cattle, and she taught him how to track wild animals and avoid hazards in the hills. Each day, he felt a sense of hope return. For the first time in years, he believed that the ranch might survive. One afternoon, while they were fixing a broken gate, she stopped suddenly and held up her hand. The cowboy froze, watching her eyes. She pointed toward the hills, where distant figures moved slowly but deliberately. He squinted and saw them, men on horses, carrying bundles and tools. The girl whispered that they were looking for land to take, that they didn't care about the people who lived there. The cowboy felt anger and fear mix inside him. He had fought for years to protect his ranch alone, but now he understood the truth. He could not do it alone. The girl suggested they set up traps and barriers, not to hurt anyone but to protect the property. She showed him how to use natural materials to slow down intruders, and how to create signals with rocks and branches to alert them if danger approached. The cowboy followed her instructions, amazed at her resourcefulness. Together they turned the ranch into a place that could defend itself. That night they sat by the fire in the small kitchen. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but inside there was warmth. The cowboy finally asked her about her past. She hesitated, staring into the flames, then spoke quietly. Her family had been scattered when she was very young. She had lived alone in the mountains, moving from place to place, learning to survive with what the land gave her. People had not been kind to her. She had learned to trust very few and to rely on herself above all. The cowboy listened, feeling a deep respect for her strength. He realized that the skills she shared with him were not just knowledge, they were survival. And now she had chosen to share that survival with him, a man she barely knew. It was a bond stronger than words, built on shared struggle and mutual respect. Days turned into weeks. The cowboy noticed changes in himself. He no longer felt the crushing weight of loneliness. The ranch, though still struggling, had a rhythm again. The cattle were safer, the fences stronger, and the fields slowly recovering. The girl moved among the land with quiet authority, and he followed her lead more than his own instincts. Slowly he began to trust her judgment completely. One evening a storm approached. Dark clouds rolled over the hills and lightning split the sky. The cowboy felt a pang of fear, remembering the fire that had nearly destroyed everything. The girl, however, remained calm. She guided him to secure the animals, tie down supplies, and prepare the barn for the worst. She moved swiftly and confidently, as if she had done this countless times before. The cowboy realized that he had learned not only to survive but also to trust someone fully, something he hadn't done in years. When the storm passed, the land was soaked, and the ranch had survived unscathed. The cowboy felt a deep gratitude toward the girl. She had not only helped him save his ranch from physical danger, but had also brought hope back into his life. Her presence reminded him why he had fought for the land all these years. He realized that survival was more than working the land. It was about trust, companionship, and the strength to face challenges together. The girl stayed a little longer that night, sharing simple meals and stories of the mountains. The cowboy listened, fascinated by the details of her life. She spoke of the stars, the wind, and the ways of animals, teaching him to see the world differently. He realized that she had given him more than help with fences and fields. She had opened his eyes to the land, to life itself. By the time the sun rose the next morning, they had formed a quiet understanding. They were no longer just two people trying to survive. They were partners in facing the challenges of the land. The ranch had gained a protector in her, but the cowboy knew he had also gained something he had not expected: friendship, respect, and a renewed sense of purpose. And so, life at the ranch began to change. The work was still hard, and the land still demanded everything they could give, but they faced it together. With the girl's knowledge and his experience, they began to rebuild, not just the ranch, but the hope that had been missing for so many long years. The hills seemed less lonely, the skies less harsh, and the ranch felt alive again, as if it had been waiting for someone like her to return it to life. The cowboy watched her one evening, standing on a ridge and looking over the land. He realized that she had not only saved the ranch, but she had also saved him. Without her, he might have lost everything, not just his land but the courage to keep going. And in that quiet moment, he knew that the bond they were forming would be the key to surviving whatever dangers still lay ahead. The days passed quietly at the ranch, but the cowboy and the Apache girl both knew that peace was fragile. One afternoon, while checking the fences near the northern pasture, the girl paused and held up her hand. Her dark eyes were sharp, focused on the distant hills. The cowboy followed her gaze and saw movement: men on horseback, riding slowly but steadily toward the ranch. Their shapes were clear enough in the heat waves of the afternoon. Something about them felt deliberate, purposeful. The girl whispered that these were the same people who had caused the fire weeks ago. They were looking for land to take, for easy profit, and the cowboy's ranch was exactly what they wanted. He felt anger rise in his chest. He had fought so hard to keep this land alive, and now outsiders were threatening everything again. But the girl's calm, steady voice reminded him not to rush blindly into danger. She had a plan. She led him to a hidden path along the ridge, where the trees grew thicker and the grass was taller. "Follow me," she said softly. "They will not expect us here." The cowboy followed, careful not to step on dry twigs that would betray their position. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years in the mountains, learning how to hide, how to move without being noticed. The cowboy felt a mixture of awe and relief. For the first time, he realized he wasn't facing danger alone. When they reached a high point overlooking the pasture, the girl crouched low and pointed to where the men were gathering. "They will split soon. Some will try to circle around," she warned. The cowboy nodded. He had fought off trespassers before, but never with anyone as capable as this girl by his side. Together, they devised a plan. They would use the natural barriers of the land, the fences, and the uneven ground to their advantage. The girl showed him how to create false trails to confuse the riders and how to hide behind hills and rocks to observe without being seen. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, the men moved closer. The cowboy's heart pounded, but the girl's presence steadied him. She whispered instructions, pointing out which rocks to use for cover, where the best vantage points were, and when to stay perfectly still. They moved like shadows themselves, silent and careful, until they were close enough to see the intruders clearly. Suddenly, one of the men spotted movement near the edge of the pasture. He shouted a warning and the others turned. The cowboy tensed, ready to defend the land, but the girl quickly pulled him behind a boulder. "Wait," she whispered. "Don't let them see us yet." She watched their movements carefully, noting the direction they were heading. The cowboy realized that without her guidance, he would have charged in blindly and been defeated. Hours passed. The men moved through the land, searching, questioning, and trying to intimidate. Each time they approached a fence or the barn, the girl had already prepared a small barrier or sign to mislead them. They climbed over false tracks, followed misleading paths, and became increasingly frustrated. The cowboy watched in amazement as her careful planning worked perfectly. Her knowledge of the land turned the ranch into a fortress without walls. As night fell, one of the men decided to test the cowboy directly. He tried to approach the barn, moving quietly under the cover of darkness. The cowboy noticed him too late and stepped into the open to confront the intruder. Suddenly, a shout rang out and the intruder drew back. The girl had moved silently behind him, surprising the man and signaling the cowboy to act. Together, they forced him away from the property without a fight, using skill and courage instead of weapons. But in the struggle, the cowboy was injured. A fall from uneven ground had left his ankle twisted and painful. He gritted his teeth, trying to stand, but the girl rushed to him without hesitation. She examined his ankle and helped him to a safe spot, supporting him like he was a child. Her hands were strong and steady. She whispered calming words, telling him to rest while she kept watch. The cowboy felt a mix of pain and gratitude. This girl had risked her own safety countless times to protect him, and now she was saving him again. The night was long. The intruders continued to roam the edges of the property, but the girl never left the cowboy's side. She made sure he was comfortable, tied ropes to support him as he tried to move, and whispered strategies for how to protect the ranch while he healed. He realized that her bravery was not just in facing danger, but in caring for others in the midst of it. He had never known anyone like her before. By morning, the intruders had left, frustrated by the defenses and careful planning. The ranch remained safe, but the cowboy knew it had been a close call. He looked at the girl, who was already moving among the animals, checking their safety and repairing any broken fence posts. Her energy seemed endless. She had not only protected the land but had also protected him. He felt a deep sense of respect and admiration for her. Over the following days, the cowboy and the girl worked to repair the damage left by the intruders. Fences were rebuilt, gates reinforced, and tracks covered to prevent future discovery. The girl showed him how to strengthen weak points in the barn and how to store supplies in places where no one could find them. Every action she taught him was a lesson in survival, in thinking ahead, and in trusting instincts honed by experience. During quiet moments, they would sit by the fire or under the stars, talking in low voices. The cowboy learned more about her life in the mountains, how she had survived alone for so many years, and how she had come to know the land so intimately. In return, he shared stories of the ranch, of his parents, and of the struggles he had faced over the years. Each story brought them closer, building a bond stronger than simple friendship. It was a bond forged in shared danger, trust, and the need to survive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky with orange and purple, the cowboy realized something important. This girl had not just saved the ranch. She had saved him from despair. He had felt hopeless before, watching the land struggle under the weight of drought, fire, and trespassers. But now, with her beside him, he saw that the land could thrive again. And he saw that he could thrive too, with her help. The girl noticed his quiet reflection and smiled faintly. She didn't speak much, but her presence was enough. The cowboy felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling he had not known in years. It was trust, hope, and a sense that he was not alone in facing the challenges ahead. They had survived danger together, and in doing so, had discovered a strength neither knew they possessed until now. As night fell over the ranch, the wind carrying the scent of wet earth and grass, the cowboy knew that more challenges would come. But for the first time, he was not afraid to face them. The Apache girl had taught him that courage was not just in fighting, but in planning, trusting, and standing together. The ranch was safe for now, but the real victory was the bond that had formed between them, a bond that could withstand storms, intruders, and hardship. In the quiet of that night, under the wide open sky filled with stars, the cowboy realized that he could not have survived without her. And in that realization, he felt something even stronger than gratitude, a promise to protect the ranch, the land, and the girl who had saved him, no matter what dangers might come next. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills, painting the dry land in soft gold. The cowboy walked through the pasture, checking the fences he and the Apache girl had repaired. The land looked peaceful, but he knew better. Danger had not disappeared, it had only paused. He felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever, but this time he didn't feel alone. The girl moved silently beside him, watching the horizon with eyes trained to notice every movement, every shadow. Days had passed since the last group of intruders had tried to take the ranch. The girl had taught him so much during that time, how to read the wind to anticipate trouble, how to spot distant riders before they could see him, and how to hide from threats without being seen. The cowboy felt himself growing stronger, not just in body, but in skill and patience. He realized he had been surviving all these years, but she had been teaching him how to live fully in the land he loved. One afternoon, while inspecting the northern fence, the girl froze. Her hand went up and she whispered a warning. From the distance, smoke rose in the hills. The cowboy felt a tight knot in his chest. He knew the intruders had returned. He could see riders in the haze, moving toward the ranch with clear purpose. They were faster, larger in number, and seemed more determined than the last time. His heart raced, but the girl's calm voice reminded him to focus. She guided him to a hidden area behind the barn, where the trees and hills formed a natural barrier. "We will defend the land," she said quietly, "but we must be smart. We cannot fight them with force alone. Use the land, use your mind." The cowboy nodded. He trusted her completely. He had seen her survive countless dangers with nothing but her skills, and he knew that following her plan was their best chance. They worked quickly, setting up barriers and creating false trails to confuse the intruders. The girl pointed out weak spots in the fences that could be reinforced and suggested where they could hide if the riders approached too closely. They moved like shadows, careful not to make noise, using the natural landscape to their advantage. The cowboy marveled at her knowledge. Every suggestion she made was precise, every action calculated. She was teaching him the kind of wisdom that only comes from living close to the land and trusting instinct above fear. As the sun dipped lower, the intruders reached the ranch. They spread out, searching for a way to enter. The cowboy and the girl watched from behind a rise unseen. One of the men tried to circle the barn, looking for supplies or livestock to steal. The girl whispered instructions, guiding the cowboy to place obstacles that would slow him down. Another man attempted to climb over the fence, but they had hidden sharpened stakes and branches in the right spots to stop him without harm. The intruders grew frustrated, their voices rising in anger as nothing seemed to work. During the night, one of the intruders tried to enter the barn where the cowboy had stored the animals. The cowboy heard the faintest sound and moved quickly, but he tripped over a root and fell hard. Pain shot through his arm and he gritted his teeth to stay quiet. The girl appeared instantly, her movements swift and silent. She helped him to his feet and whispered directions, telling him exactly where to move and what to do. Together, they guided the intruder away from the animals without a fight, relying on clever tricks and careful planning. By the time the intruders realized they were being outsmarted, the girl and the cowboy had already prepared their final defense. They had used the land itself to protect the ranch. Hidden ditches, natural barriers, and misleading trails that made it nearly impossible for the intruders to move forward. The riders grew tired, frustrated, and confused. One by one, they turned back, unable to find a way to take what they wanted. When the danger finally passed, the cowboy collapsed near the barn, exhausted but relieved. The girl sat beside him, tending to his scraped arm and bruised shoulder. He looked at her, gratitude and admiration filling his chest. She had risked everything to protect him and the ranch, and she had done it with quiet confidence and courage. He realized then that she was not just a helper, she was a partner in every sense of the word. The following days were spent repairing what had been damaged during the intruder's brief visit. The cowboy and the girl worked tirelessly, restoring fences, checking on the animals, and making sure the land was secure. She taught him how to reinforce weak points in the barn and store supplies safely. He learned how to move quietly and watch for danger before it reached him. Each day, he felt stronger, more capable, and more connected to the land and to the girl who had become his ally. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the small kitchen, the cowboy spoke quietly. He told her how much he had learned from her, how her presence had changed him, and how he could not have survived the past weeks without her. The girl smiled faintly, a rare expression that softened her usually serious face. She had never expected gratitude or praise, but it warmed her heart to hear it. She had only wanted to help, yet the bond between them had grown stronger with each challenge. The cowboy realized something important that night. The ranch had been more than just land to him. It had been a symbol of his life, his parents, and his struggle. And now, the girl had become a symbol of hope, courage, and partnership. She had not only protected the ranch but had also saved him from despair and loneliness. He felt a sense of purpose return, stronger than he had felt in years. Over the next few weeks, life at the ranch slowly returned to a steady rhythm. The intruders did not return, at least not yet. The cowboy and the girl continued their work together, strengthening the fences, tending the fields, and caring for the animals. They shared simple meals and quiet conversations, learning more about each other and finding comfort in the routine. The bond between them deepened, built on shared struggle, trust, and the knowledge that they could face danger together. One afternoon, the cowboy noticed how the girl moved among the land with quiet authority, guiding him with her knowledge and instinct. He realized that she had taught him something even more important than how to protect the ranch. She had taught him how to trust, how to act with patience, and how to see the land as a partner rather than a challenge. Every action she took reminded him of the strength that comes from understanding, skill, and courage. The cowboy felt a deep respect for her, not just for her abilities but for her spirit. She had faced so much in her life, loneliness, danger, and loss, and yet she moved forward with calm determination. He knew that he would follow her lead in any challenge, and that she trusted him enough to share the burden of survival. Together, they had created a bond stronger than fear or danger, a bond that would endure whatever trials the land might bring. As night fell over the ranch, the sky filled with stars, the cowboy sat quietly, reflecting on the days that had passed. He realized that the real victory was not just saving the ranch, but discovering the strength and courage that comes from partnership and trust. The girl had changed his life. She had not only helped him survive, but had also helped him believe that the ranch and life itself could thrive once more. He looked at her as she moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing a simple meal. He felt a warmth in his chest that he had not felt in years, a mix of gratitude, admiration, and hope. For the first time in a long time, he understood that survival was not only about hard work and determination. It was about trust, courage, and the quiet strength that comes from standing together in the face of danger. The cowboy knew that the challenges were not over. There would always be threats, storms, wildfires, and people who wanted to take what was not theirs. But he also knew that with her beside him, he could face anything. Together, they had proven that courage, intelligence, and partnership could overcome even the most determined threats. And in that knowledge, the ranch, the land, and their spirits were safe for now and for the future. The first light of morning spilled over the hills, turning the ranch golden. After weeks of tension, danger, and hard work, the air finally felt calm. The cowboy stood on the porch, looking over the fields he had fought so hard to save. The fences were mended, the animals were safe, and the barn, once threatened by fire and intruders, now stood strong. He felt a sense of relief he had not known in years. But more than the land, it was the presence of the Apache girl that made him feel truly secure. She walked beside him silently, scanning the horizon as always. Though the danger seemed gone, she never let her guard down completely. Her eyes, sharp and steady, moved over the land with confidence. The cowboy knew that this vigilance had saved the ranch more than once. She had not only guided him but had taught him to see the land in a new way, how to read the wind, sense approaching danger, and understand the signs that most people ignored. Over the past weeks, they had worked side by side. Together, they repaired fences, cleared fields, and prepared the ranch for the future. The cowboy had learned to trust her completely, following her guidance without hesitation. Each day brought new lessons, not only about the land but about courage, patience, and partnership. He realized that survival was not just about strength or skill. It was about connection, trust, and the willingness to face challenges together. One afternoon, as they rested under the shade of an old oak tree, the cowboy finally spoke. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "Without you, this ranch would be gone, and I might have lost myself too." The girl looked at him, her eyes soft but steady. She did not speak at first, letting him feel the weight of his own words. Then she said, "You worked hard for this land. I only helped, but you never gave up, even when it seemed impossible." The cowboy shook his head, smiling faintly. "I would have given up without you. You didn't just save my ranch. You saved my life." His words surprised even him. He had never said such things aloud, but in that quiet moment under the wide open sky, he felt he had to. She smiled faintly, a rare expression that warmed the air between them. She did not reply with words, but her gaze held gratitude and understanding. As the days passed, life at the ranch began to settle into a steady rhythm. The animals grazed safely in the pastures. The fences stood strong, and the fields were beginning to recover from months of neglect. The cowboy and the girl continued their work together, each teaching the other lessons learned from their experiences. She taught him how to store supplies more cleverly, how to track the subtle signs of weather changes, and how to read the land as if it were alive. He shared his knowledge of farming, animals, and surviving long seasons of drought. Their bond grew quietly but steadily. They shared meals, laughter, and small stories from their lives. The cowboy told her about his parents and the memories tied to the ranch. She shared tales of the mountains, the wind, and the animals she had lived with for years. In these exchanges, they discovered a deep respect for each other, a trust that went beyond words. They had faced danger together, learned from one another, and built something stronger than fear or loneliness. One evening, a gentle wind swept across the fields, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the promise of rain. The cowboy and the girl stood near the barn, looking at the land they had saved. He realized that the ranch was more than just a place. It was a reflection of their perseverance, courage, and partnership. He turned to her, feeling a sense of peace he had never experienced before. "We did this together," he said softly. "And I am glad you stayed." She nodded, her eyes scanning the hills even as her voice softened. "The land is safer now," she said. "But more importantly, you are stronger. And so am I." The cowboy smiled. He understood what she meant. Together they had grown, not only in skill but in trust, resilience, and understanding. They had learned that life was not only about surviving threats, but about building something lasting, something meaningful. Rain began to fall gently that night, soaking the earth after months of dryness. The cowboy and the girl watched it together, feeling the warmth of the fire and the safety of their home. The land drank deeply, and the ranch seemed to breathe again. He felt a wave of gratitude for her presence, for her courage, and for the life they were rebuilding together. He realized that survival was no longer a lonely struggle, it was a shared journey. In the following days, they focused on strengthening the ranch further. The cowboy repaired the old barn roof, following the girl's guidance to make it more durable. She checked the pastures, ensuring that the animals had fresh water and safe places to graze. They worked side by side, moving with efficiency and quiet understanding. Their teamwork had become instinctual, each anticipating the other's movements and needs. As the weeks passed, the intruders never returned. Word had spread that the ranch was well defended and that its owners were clever and strong. But the cowboy and the girl did not celebrate this lightly. They continued to care for the land, knowing that threats could come again. Their vigilance was steady, not anxious, because now they faced life as partners. They had learned that strength was not just in muscle or skill, but in trust, courage, and the bond between them. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the cowboy finally spoke again. "I want you to know," he said, "this ranch, this life, I wouldn't have made it without you. You saved more than the land, you saved me." The girl looked at him quietly, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. She did not speak, but the warmth in her gaze said everything he needed to know. From that moment, life at the ranch was no longer just survival. It became a story of hope, courage, and shared strength. The cowboy and the girl continued their work, but they also began to dream. They planned for the future, thinking about planting new crops, expanding the pastures, and making the ranch stronger than it had ever been. The land, once threatened and fragile, was now alive and thriving, just as they were. In the quiet nights, under the wide sky filled with stars, the cowboy often reflected on how much had changed. The ranch was safe, the animals were secure, and the land had recovered. But most importantly, he had found someone to share his life with, a partner who had proven that courage, wisdom, and trust could overcome any danger. She had brought hope, strength, and meaning back into his life, and he had learned to see the land and himself through new eyes. The Apache girl, too, found peace in the ranch. She had lived alone for many years, facing the dangers of the mountains and the hardships of survival. But here, she had found trust, companionship, and a purpose beyond mere survival. Together they had created something lasting, a home, a safe place, and a shared life built on courage, understanding, and respect. As the seasons changed, the ranch flourished. Crops grew stronger, the cattle multiplied, and the fences held firm against wind and rain. The cowboy and the girl worked tirelessly, side by side, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The land rewarded their care, and they rewarded it with their attention and skill. Every sunrise brought new hope, and every sunset reminded them of how far they had come. One day, as they walked across the pasture, the cowboy paused and looked at her. "We've saved this place together," he said softly, "and I don't just mean the ranch. We've saved each other too." She smiled faintly, her eyes bright with understanding. "Yes," she replied, "we have." And so the ranch that had once been at the edge of ruin became a symbol of perseverance, partnership, and hope. The cowboy and the Apache girl stood together, ready for whatever challenges might come, knowing that together they could face anything. Their bond had been forged in fire, danger, and struggle, and it had grown into something stronger than either had imagined. The land was safe, their lives were intertwined, and the future stretched out before them like the open hills, full of possibility, promise, and the quiet joy of survival shared together. And under the wide, endless sky, the cowboy knew without a doubt that the ranch, the land, and his life had been saved, not by one person alone, but by the courage, wisdom, and heart of the Apache girl who had come into his life when he needed her most.